Assalamualaikum and good afternoon everyone. Okay, sangat gembira hari ini dapat berkongsi. So how are you? How are you guys doing today? All the students, I hope okay, even in COVID. All right. Before that, saya nak minta maaf dulu. If I may ask, right? Okay, what is actually your status in your thesis writing? All here consider new students, because topic that given to me, right? This is the first step in your thesis writing. So if I may ask, what is the status of your writing? Any response from you? Is it okay? Doing well? Or still don't know what to do? Any response to share? Or semuanya malu-malu? Or all of you here, or most of you are international students, right? Okay, I'm really sorry if you, do not understand really in bahasa, but I will use rojak. But yeah, I do believe some of you are okay with bahasa Melayu, but it's okay. My presentation will be in English. Okay, before that came for the agenda for today. It's already actually given to me the very simple topic but very important in thesis writing. A research proposal, process of preparing a research proposal in the area of study area, sampling technique, and a bit about the data collection, especially on your primary and secondary method. Okay. So before we start, I would like to actually share with you 2 slides, just a picture, your journey. I call it as my journey to PhD or master thesis writing. Okay, I realize and understand, really understand, because my experience, doing PhD, Allah, mashallah. Okay, I realize and understand writing thesis is not an easy task. It's not an easy thing. I can actually conclude that number one, in thesis writing, very challenging process, mentally and physically. You must ready for that. And number two, definitely it's a tiring process. Okay, writing a draft, submit it to supervisors, then get comment, do some correction and write it again, and submit the draft and return back, do some correction. It's endless cycle, right? Then for sure you must ready to adopt all these kind of cycles, right? And number three, writing thesis, PhD or PhD, definitely in PhD level or master's level, actually testing your passion, menguji kesabaran Anda. Sometimes, people, they cannot control crying, and some of them, kemurungan, then don't know what to do, and don't want to talk, just keep quiet, doing nothing. Okay, this is a very stressful. It's actually a process to challenge your intellectual ability, right? Ability, they will test your ability, especially in identifying research areas, identifying the research problem, how to conduct the research, how about the literature review, what is the research motivation and research gaps. This is all actually challenge your intellectual ability. Then from number 1 to number 4, I cannot rank them, but all of this become a major contribution for your journey in order to complete your thesis, masters or PhD, right? Dia tidak berakhir di situ, but before graduating, okay, in Viva, Viva Bose, for instance, by looking at these, pictures, you must really, okay, sangat banyak halangan for you, right? So one thing that important, go for it. This is your future, whatever it is, okay? You must face it, determination, all right? So whether you are in master's level or PhD level, definitely this is your real challenge, depending your work, depending or justifying your thesis in the Viva Bose process. All right. So with that, I will start with the first slide. On the study area. Okay. So you all ready? Because today I've given the task to share knowledge on several things, especially on the study area and the sampling and also the data collection. Okay, it is part of the methodology. So for your need to just to actually teach to you. I'm not here to teach you, right? Just sharing information and experience, right? So if there is any weaknesses or errors, right, I will try to fix it, okay, for future sharing session. All right. So with that, I start with the study area. Okay, for your information, it's either your first step, langkah pertama, your first steps before identifying your topic, right? Because we need to know what is actually the relevant areas. The area, you will look on what field. For instance, we are in business faculty, right? Definitely, maybe you are accounting students, or maybe you are marketing student, economic, or maybe tourism, or whatever, right? But in general sense, study area is actually identifying the relevant area directly related to your research. Okay, then the important words here. This is the area where is it essential for you to cover. Okay, because we understand that, for instance, in marketing. Sorry, I'm giving you example of marketing because I'm in marketing department, and my major is in branding. So if you actually really wanted to identify your area in marketing, there are few relevant areas. Sorry, can you mute your mic, please? Sorry. Urustia, can you handle this? Okay, all right. Thank you very much. Okay, continue. So just now I'm talking about marketing. Sorry, because I'm a marketing lecturer. Okay, in the area of marketing, right? There are many or various specific or relevant areas to actually connect with the marketing. For instance, in branding, in pricing, in product itself, product development, advertising, all communication, right? So how do I describe a study area in the research proposal? There are a few tips. This is based on my experience in early stage, okay, and definitely requires you to read a lot. In thesis writing, okay, to actually differentiate between good students and not good students, sorry to say that, okay, not because of dia pandai ke tak pandai, right, but very much contributed by the amount of literature. Number 3, it's also reading. Number 4, then you write down in your paper in small books. Okay. And number 5, you try to select. Okay. So in tips number 1, especially in your early stage, you need to check from your previous literature, especially on literature gap. Okay. Okay, hold on. Okay. Sorry. Saya ini the number 1, previous research. Again, number 1 is read, number 2 is read, number 3 pun read juga. So, these 3 times of reading and reading and reading. Okay? To identify your literature gaps, to identify your research motivation, and the more in motivation. Nowadays, very popular of the area of COVID-19 research, right? So before you decide to choose what area, you must check and read carefully your previous literature. Okay, number 2. Again, after reading, maybe because in my experience, doing PhD, this is my own experience. My supervisor asked me in the first day meeting, they asked me to read about 200 journals and articles. Okay, you just imagine that. First day, okay, SUDDIN, from now on, from today, you go back and read 200 articles. Okay. Saya pun terkejut, bro. Wah. But again, tell you that, right? Read more. I'm sure what is the in your area. And I'm sure you will understand, you will know, you will able to identify what is actually the areas, okay, areas, the trend of research in your area. Then I believe, if you finish 50 first in your reading journals or articles, you definitely know what is the possible or suggestion for future research in your areas. That's number 1. Tips number 1. And continue reading until you finish the 200. This is for PhD, right? And second one, after reading all the articles, not only reading, please make sure you do some writing there for every single journals that you have read. Okay, then after that, brainstorm, discuss with your supervisor and your friend within your areas. Okay, after reading, you need to brainstorm. Jangan duduk diam sorang-sorang. Alright, brainstorm and discuss. Because definitely, if you read a lot, Kepala you akan full of idea, but you do not want, you do not know which one to choose. Then definitely you need help from your supervisors or your friends, your colleague among you. Make sure within your areas. I'm afraid if you actually go and discuss different people, especially we are a non-science faculty, right? You go and ask lecturers or members from science or from any field, right? Which is a bit different with our business management areas. So careful on that. And the third one, to actually help you in early stage, if you already read so many articles and already brainstorm and discuss with your supervisor but still stuck, what you can do is to check the current situation. Okay, let's say now, very popular COVID-19, right? By looking at the general issues of COVID-19, there are so many opportunities in doing research. You can go for medical research. You can go for the psychological research. You can go for the management research. Or maybe you can go for economic research or even attitude research. From this, from the current issues, right, around us, happen right now in Malaysia and in the world, go back to your literature. Which one is suitable for you to select, especially in answering the questions of relevant area. Okay, are you okay or not so far? Then the fourth one, definitely ada orang akan tanya, sampai bila saya harus membaca? Where to stop? So after the current issues, right, you go back to the step number 1, brainstorm and discuss with your supervisors and friends. Okay, then after that, you must select one area and discuss again in detail, especially and the selection process. Okay, continue with number 1, the previous researcher, when my supervisor asked me to read 200. After you complete 100 articles, believe me, you will understand, okay, in fingertips, okay, what is the correct direction of your areas of studies. You know, for example, in my experience, back to 2009, right, when I so bingung, so uncertain about my area, actually I'm looking into branding issues. But what happened? I cannot identify what is the actual issues or actual problem in branding until I identify one article. They are actually investigating the personality, which is on the area of brand personality. I'm giving you example. Okay, when we are looking into the telecommunication provider, right, today, like Celcom, this is example from Malaysia, Celcom, DG, Maxis, for instance, right, this is the biggest, the 3 biggest right now, right. When we are looking into their brand, are very popular, 3 of them, but can you tell me the difference between these 3 big name in a telecommunication provider? Sometimes we do know, right? Almost the same. Okay, look at the handphone given to you, the ₱1 or any package, right? When you look into the design, in the handphone technology, almost the same. Look at the advertising. Look at the communication style within this three, almost the same. Okay, look at the price. Okay, bill bulanan setiap bulan, almost the same for every single provider. Again, what else? So the question is, what is the difference between these three? When I read the article of brand personality, it actually gives me idea. Many things can be copied, but personality cannot. Okay, but You cannot stop there. You need to select one. So at my time, I'm going for the brand personality. I choose one and I discuss again with my supervisor to confirm, especially on the selection process. And definitely, there are few selection yang you dah identify, but you need to discuss again and select. Okay, banyak sangat cakap. Any question so far for the first slide? I got almost 20 over slide today. Are you okay? My time is until 4 o'clock. Any questions so far? Okay, no? So can I continue? Okay. Okay, number 2, this is another example. Okay, another example of study area. In general, right, study area kita boleh describekan sebagai your description of your research area, a map of your study area. Where was your research conducted? Okay, again, I'm giving you example of coronavirus disease starting from 2019 and become now a pandemic, COVID-19, very popular, common today, right? Okay, but if we really need to know in detail, especially when we are trying to relate the coronavirus disease into investigation, especially doing thesis, masters or PhD, right? Look at your field in UMS. Discipline, go for business management, humanity, maybe cultural study, tourism, or social sciences, right? Okay, but you need to know that in area of study, there are so many things. You need to choose one. Be specific where relevant. Okay, look at back to the coronavirus here. When you are a medical students, definitely you are interested on vaccine, for instance, or medicines or remedies, on maybe investigating how to deal with this coronavirus. The impact of coronavirus, especially for the luxury, because people are they are they don't want to buy the luxury one during the pandemic because there is no need, right? Then how about the social? How about the personal, psychological side? Okay, so to relate the study area, maybe we can choose in your brainstorming and discussion with your group. Okay, you use coronavirus disease. It is a big idea, but every single individual, you as a student, you can actually discuss and choose which one is suitable for your area, especially for your discipline and also your area of studies. Okay, and coronavirus, I believe now out in journals or article, there is so many articles and journal published on coronavirus, even in our areas, management, accounting, marketing, and all that, right? So I move on again. When we talk about study area, it is there is an element of scope. A scope of study that refers to the element that will be covered in your research project. Because definitely you cannot cover all areas, all element, all dimension. Definitely, it's nearly impossible for you to cover all of that. Okay, so before you come out with the final decision or final selection of your study area, please consider scope of your study. Okay, you can go for theories or you can go for purpose. limitation of the study, maybe you can actually scope or limit your population or location or even time. For instance, for accounting and economics, right? They are very interested on the time series analysis. So we can go for time. Or maybe for the location. Now you are in Malaysia, but you're interested to study the comparison between data from Malaysia and also China, the comparison studies. Okay, but make sure because the main purpose, the scope of the study is that explain the extent to which the research area will be explored and thus specify the parameters that will be observed within the study. Again, the words is parameters. Okay, even now, right? When we talk about the COVID-19, so many paper or work being published on the impact of COVID-19. Impact, it's too broad topic. Impact on what? Impact on economy, impact on social, impact on what? Psychological, impact on purchase intention, impact or effect on the consumer behavior when people are looking into online buying rather than go to shop directly, right? This is all the study area that we can actually choose to put it in your proposal. So far, any questions on the study area? Any questions? Are you all clear? Can I continue? Okay, move on. Okay, another thing, okay, this is actually I copy from one website, okay, just to share with you how to choose the area of study. Okay, definitely this is not the, I mean, you can choose any tips, right? But this is to share with you the 7 tips, popular one, okay, especially on choosing or identifying your study area. Okay, number 1, right? Because in my earlier slide, I'm looking into the early stage. But the top 7 tips here, it's already in the middle. Okay, in the middle stage, where number 1, after reading a lot, you need to eliminate options slowly so you can actually focus. Remember, when you identify your scope, you actually in the process of number 1, eliminating options slowly, because you already know your scope of study. All right, and number 2, even though you try to eliminate some option, right? But also number 2, you need to cross out the option, because from my experience, doing research, conducting research, writing PhD thesis, it's always, continuous. Even you already eliminate that option, please remember, maybe sometimes you take out that and put into your final list. Please remember that. Okay, number 3, find the right academic advisor, especially your supervisor. Okay, supervisor, talk to them, discuss with them. Okay, then ask their advice for your selection, help you to select the right area for your study. Because sometimes one popular questions, right? Always ask yourself what I should do. Again, because when you try to answer that, you need to read a lot, and you need to discuss, and you need to verify and choose which one is the best. But sometimes people are, lack of motivation, lazy, don't want to read. They are decided to go keep quiet, do nothing, then your supervisor will do not know what is your status, right? Then the 7 tips, again, if you really cannot work, I mean, ask your supervisor the same things, right? Ask for advice from your friends, other people that you trust can help. Okay, I'm not saying that if you cannot go along with your supervisor, go ask other people. No, this is just to give you some different ideas. Okay, because sometimes we need to ask your supervisor, we need to ask our supervisor, but problem or cannot go along. So we need other people. So okay, you can choose your friends, maybe other lecturers, different faculties, or different areas. It's okay. Just ask for the information. Okay. And number 5, gain experience in different field. Because this is very important. Because in the modern writing thesis, right, our areas and focus could be a combination between 2 or 3 different areas. Maybe psychological plus marketing, or maybe accounting plus marketing, or maybe tourism. Definitely, when you talk about hotel management, tourism studies, or cultural studies, right? There are this is 3 very related to the marketing decision, because they are also talking about the consumer attitude, consumer behavior. So we need to have some experience in different field. Okay, number 6, find creative ways of learning about different majors and parts. Okay, this is also very helpful for you. Okay, and number 7, consider your emotion throughout the process. This is definitely when you actually look at the earlier slide here, right? Can I go back? Look at my thesis is written blood, sweat, tears, and coffee. This is the real emotion. Okay, I don't know. In my experience, very, very challenging. Even I ask myself whether this is my right choice or not. Yeah. Even I ask myself again and again and again, adakah ini pilihan yang betul bagi saya? It's like, crazy people. I mean, sitting alone in the kedai mama and sitting alone in the library. Tengok dinding, pandang depan belakang, don't know what to do. Again, this is the real emotion expression of your journey. Okay? Again, any questions or not before we move? After this slide, how do I choose an area of studies? And these top 7 tips, just idea for you to share. Maybe some of you agree or not agree. It's up to you. But this is just an idea and sharing session for you to actually choose your area of study. Okay, move on. Go to the sampling. Okay, before that, any example or maybe you can share the area of your study before we start with sampling. Maybe you have some critical questions need to ask about the area of study, because I believe all of you here are in business management, right? In FPEP, right? Faculty of Business, Accounting and Economics, right? Any questions? You need clarification or you need more discussion on that before we start sampling? Sampling is very technical things. Okay, then for the purpose of writing proposal, here I'm giving you a very broad definition, very broad concept, because in the process of preparing proposal, we just need on surface, on basic one. It's totally different with your final writing in your thesis. Okay, so no questions. So I directly move to sampling, right? Okay, number 1. for the sampling is a process used in statistical analysis. Okay, predetermined number of observation are taken from the large population. I think if you done your masters, okay, or even in degree, right? Yeah, you got some idea on what is actually sampling, right? What is population? What is sample? But important for the thesis writing, especially for masters and PhD, we need to know two different types of sampling method. Number one is probability sampling, and number two is non-probability sampling. Okay, what is important here? You should clearly explain how you select your sample. Okay, whether you go for probability sampling or non-probability sampling. Okay, that's very important. You can choose any one or any technique or any types or any method you want, but you must justify clearly. Right? Okay, move on. Okay, to justify your selection of your method or technique, whether probability or non-probability, we need to go directly or specifically on number one is sampling frame. Number two is sampling size. Number three is sampling unit. And number four is sampling technique and procedure. This is very, very important in order for you or to every students to justify the sampling method and sampling technique. Okay, okay, we go one by one here. All right, sampling frame. Okay, kalau boleh saya baca dari sini directly on the definition. Is the actual list of individual that the sample will be drawn from. Okay, ideally it should include the entire target population, but yes, impossible for you to target all the population. That's why sampling comes into the major consideration in any research. Okay, but before we choose, we need to know the frame. I'm giving you an example, right? If you willing to study the student satisfaction in UMS, right? What is your sampling frame? What is your sampling frame? All students. But if you your intention to study the consumer attitude among female students, so what is your sampling frame? All women students. That's simple as that, right? But in order for you to actually identify the frame, go back to your scope of your study, right? Very easy, but you need to determine and justify why why student, or why female student, or why male students, or why we need to study this different age, or youngers, or olders, or generation Y, or generation X. We need to justify. Okay, and the justification of your scope will determine your sampling frame. Okay, in writing thesis, you need to inform, you need to state clearly your frame. So they will actually help you to represent data that just later on you will collect to represent the actual population of your study. All right, move on. Go to the sampling size. So the question is, how many sampling? I believe all of you know about G-Power, right? There are few softwares out there can be used or available for us to choose how many samples from the total population and the frame just now. You calculate using G-Power, they will determine for you. There are few actually style of identifying the sampling size, but I will advise to you here to use G-Power, because you can claim G power is very powerful. Then it's a very clear citation for you. If the examiner asks you how do you go about selecting your sample size, I'm using G power. That's it. You are safe, right? Then the most important things, especially look at the pictures there. Questions: how large should my sample be? The answer is it depends. Large enough to be an accurate representation of the population. Large enough to achieve statistical significant result. A long time ago, when the SPSS very popular, right? To run EFA, exploratory factor analysis in SPSS, required us what? 200 minimum sample. Okay, but when the PLS comes in, PLS is mainly for very low or very minimum number of sample can use, but not for AMOS. Okay, so it depends on you. It depends of your objective, and depends on your study areas and also your frame, sampling frame, right? But the important point here, how to calculate, I recommend to you to use G power. But this is not the absolute, or this is not the only technique, right? You can use other. Previously, later on, in my era, I'm using Hay et al. 2010. Okay, where we calculate the number of sample size based on the measurement item, whether we times 5, times 8, or the maximum times 10 to identify, to determine the number or the sampling size. But now we got technology, we got software we can use. So if the examiner asks you how you go about selecting your sample size, the answer is I'm using G power. That's it. Right? Okay, move on. Sampling unit. This is very critical and also very related to your study area. Let's say, right, for instance, now I'm interested to study the effect of COVID-19 based on the marketing perspective. Okay, so the question is, siapa responden kamu? Alright, so I can go for individual. Or maybe I go for individual, could be the customers, or could be the managers, or could be the employees of the company. Okay, or maybe group of people. Okay, group of people, maybe what? Golongan ibu-ibu, or golongan suri rumah, for instance, or workers people, or government agencies, or non-government agencies, right? The group of people. Or maybe you interested on identifying or investigating young generation or schools children, for instance, right? Because of COVID-19. Then again, a sampling unit could be artifact, could be books, photo, newspaper, and very popular one is geographical unit. You need to study only Kota Kinabalu, effect of the COVID-19 from the perspective of economic in Kota Kinabalu, for instance. Sampling unit. So maybe in town, you can actually interview individual, interview the owners of the shop, interview maybe the social workers, or maybe you wanted to study the frontliners, for instance. Okay, and the last one maybe you can actually use in your sampling unit is social interaction. Okay, again, subject under observations on which information is collected. Itu yang dipanggil sebagai sampling unit. Okay, remember, sampling frame, clear sampling frame, clear sampling sampling size, clear sampling unit. This is 3 important things in your proposal. Okay, move on. On the sampling technique, this is very critical. And for your information, for this today's sharing session, this is just a surface. Hanyalah pendedahan umum, a broad identification, and we will discuss just a very broad, but definitely from my experience, this is a very technical, especially on sampling, identifying with technique and procedure you need to employ in your study. Okay, but before that, the definition is the name or other identification of the specific process by which the entities of the sample have been selected. Okay, sampling technique. And the primary goal is to create a representative sample, one in which the smaller group accurately represent the characteristic of the larger group. Okay. Then again, the technique used will vary based on the circumstances under which study that conducted, as well as the aim of the research. Okay. So we move to number 1. Okay. Sampling technique on probability sampling. Ada 4 options. Number 1 is simple random sampling. Number 2 is stratified sampling, cluster sampling, and systematic sampling. Okay, and probability sampling involve random selection, allowing you to make strong statistical inferences about the whole group. Okay, later on, I will share with you the differences between probability sampling and non-probability sampling. But so far, we go this first. Okay. The important question is when to use probability sampling. Yeah, we know that there is cluster sampling, systematic sampling, stratified, or simple random sampling, right? So when to use? Number 1, when you want to reduce the sampling bias. Yes. This is very, very technical and systematic. So by using probability sampling, it's actually help us to reduce bias, sampling bias. Okay. And number 2, when the population is usually diverse, right? Because we cannot control the sample, we do not know, this is new area for us. The level of uncertainty are very high, so we need to use the probability sampling, okay, to represent the whole population. Okay, again, number 3, to create an accurate sample, right? By using systematic, for instance, or using cluster. We are actually dividing into few groups, right? So this is 3 reasons when to use probability sampling. Okay, look back at the plus slide here. Simple random sampling, where from this sampling, right, we use simple random style. Okay, but if you go to stratified, it's actually divided into various groups, different stage or different dimension using stratified. Again, when you do cluster, we are actually dividing into your sample into different cluster. Maybe younger cluster, maybe old cluster, maybe female cluster, or male cluster, or school children cluster, or sekolah menengah cluster, for instance, or woman consumer, or male consumer. Depends on cluster. And very systematic, this is normally we have us to use very systematic numbering in selecting your sample. Please remember, because why we use probability sampling? Because we need to reduce bias. Okay, that's very important. Okay, move on to the non-probability sampling. Involve random selection based on convenience or other criteria allowing you to easily collect data. Convenience sampling, for instance. Suka hati kita nak ambil mana-mana. Okay? Easy for us to collect data. Anyone. Let's say just now, I'm giving you an example to study attitude the customer satisfaction among students, for instance, right? So you can choose anyone as a student, any students you want to become your sample. That's on convenience sampling. Mana-mana yang senang, itulah you punya sample. Dipanggil sebagai, call it as convenience sampling. Right. And number 2, very popular, judgmental and purposive sampling. This is quite technical because it's up to you to choose which one, but you need to have or to set up the criteria. Maybe criteria of education level, or maybe you set the criteria based on income, or maybe you set the criteria based on gender, for instance. So you select according to the criteria. Mana-mana sampel yang meet the criteria can become your sample. Same goes to quota sampling. You divide it into few groups, few quota, then you select from the quota. Then the last one is from snowballing. This is very popular when you are conducting research through online, where you give one people or one family, one group, then people in individual, in group and family will distribute among them. That's what we call as snowballing sampling. Right? Then move on. The popular question says when to use non-probability sampling. And number 1, use this type of sampling to indicate if a particular trait or characteristic exists in population. Let's say, right, my example just now, the student satisfaction in UMS, we know the characteristic and the traits of students, Malaysian students, for instance, or international students, for instance. We know them already, almost similar. So we can use the convenience sampling or non-probability sampling. The number 2, researchers widely use non-probability sampling when they aim at conducting a qualitative research or pilot study or exploratory study. Yes, this is very true because when you conduct qualitative study research, right, we cannot use probability sampling. We need to use non-probability sampling because we need to go in depth, especially on interviewing people, or we need to survey the attitude of the people or the character of the people. Overall, a broad observation. So in qualitative research, especially on pilot study also, for instance, right? Qualitative study, yeah, a pilot study where we need to collect a very small sample within your framework, within your sample frame. Okay? And if you're interested to conduct research based on exploratory research, you came into one areas, you don't know what is the characteristics there, what is the attitude there, what is the traits there, right? This is just to explore what happened. Let's say I'm giving you an example, the micro enterprise in Sabah, when they are trying to conduct the readiness of this micro industry, right, in adapting technology, especially in online business, they conduct exploratory research. Then, in the process of collecting data, they go use non-probability sampling because they do not know what really happened to the micro enterprise in Sabah. Because COVID-19 is just happened, very new. They don't have any experience handling this kind of event or activities. They don't know how to conduct business online. So we need to explore what really happened to the macro industry, especially in Sabah. Okay, that's why we need non-probability sampling. And again, number 3, limited time constraint. Because if you go for probability sampling, especially in systematic, cluster, or whatever, right, we need a lot of time consuming in data collection. But kalau kamu ada limited time, so the best is non-probability sampling. Okay. Then when the researcher needs to observe whether a particular issue needs in-depth analysis or not. Okay, this is actually related to the qualitative research. Let's say you need to know in detail what happened to the economy, or we need to know what happened in detail about the tourism industry, especially when the government implement the MCO, the PKP, and they close the border, the business close down everything, especially for the tourism industry, right? We need to know, our intention is to know what is really happened. So we need to conduct in-depth analysis, maybe interview, maybe a real survey research on the impact, the direct impact to the tourism industry in Malaysia, for instance. So here we need non-probability sampling. And again, the last one, use it when you do not intend to generate result that generalize the entire population. This is the weaknesses of non-probability sampling compared to the probability sampling. In probability sampling, the result we can claim or we can generalize the result, from the entire population, but not for non-probability sampling. Okay. Any questions so far? Okay. Before questions, before I take questions, I need to discuss this first. Okay, the differences between non-probability sampling and probability sampling. Okay, we got here non-probability sampling, and the right one is the probability sampling. Again, number one, what? Sample selection based on subjective judgment. This is mainly for qualitative or in exploratory. You do not know what really happened. You are very new there, so you need to investigate what really happened. Compared to the probability sampling, the sample is selected at random. Okay, and number two, not everyone has an equal chance to participate. Okay, this is the main criteria for non-probability sampling, because banyak sangat, luas sangat areanya, kita tak boleh cover. Then there is has an equal, not everyone has an equal chance to participate. Compared to the probability sampling, everyone in the population has an equal chance, especially when you control the population. Okay, and especially when you group them into systematic, in the cluster, right? So the population has an equal chance in getting selected. All right, the third one is the researchers does not consider sampling bias. Okay, this is very, very important. Okay, definitely in sampling frame, if there is no equal chance, the sampling bias will be exist. Okay, compared to the probability sampling, this is used for reducing the bias. Then the fourth one, for non-probability sampling compared to the probability sampling, is useful when the population has similar traits and characteristics. Okay, then the fifth one is the sample does not accurately represent the population. And the last one, finding respondents isn't easy. Okay, compared to the probability sampling, useful when the population is diverse. Okay, and used to create an accurate sample because we're very systematic. Okay, then the last one, finding the right respondents is not an easy. Okay, that's why by looking at this slide, we know the differences between the non-probability sampling and probability sampling. But for the purpose of writing proposal, right, you just not go in depth, but you just mention which technique, okay, whether non-probability sampling or probability sampling. Then we go for the very specific technique, whether you go for convenience sampling, a quota sampling, snowballing, or systematic sampling, or a cluster sampling, you need to mention that clearly in your proposal. All right? Okay, move on. Are you okay so far? Am I go too fast? Senyap je semuanya. All right? We reach the third agenda for today. It is about data collection. I think this is very simple. Then I will share with you a very broad and definition and very surface explanation, because for the purpose of writing your proposal, you just mention your data collection, whether if you decided to go for primary, what primary. If you decided to go for secondary, what types of data in secondary. That's all. All right. Then by looking at this slide, okay, based on these pictures, market research data, this is example. Okay. So the secondary data, it is actually reflecting the existing information collected by others, which is already published. Articles is already published. Annual report, for instance, or magazines or news, printed or online, all existing information. All right. Compared to the primary data, new information collected directly from your sample. Okay. Let's say in-depth interview. Kita tak akan dapat data sehingga kita interview orang tersebut. Atau sehingga kita interview sampel yang kita pilih. Right? And also conducting survey. Distributing questionnaire. Then asking people through online using Google Form, for instance. Or we conduct focus group. Collect, call them, and make them in group. Then we discuss within the group. That's why we call focus group. And ask them specific questions. All right? Maybe semi-structured questions. Then again, very popular now in social media monitoring. Online data collection. This is all primary. Compared to the secondary, maybe government statistic from the statistics department, or maybe industry association, kita ada berapa banyak NGO, then trade publication published by the Bank Negara, company websites, dan kita ada annual report, kita ada website information. We can actually check from them. Then market research report, whether government produce or independent company produce market research, we can buy it or we can subscribe it. This is all considered secondary data. But for the purpose of your proposal, you just mention clearly what types of data, okay, yang you perlukan dalam kajian. Whether you go for secondary or primary. Then later on, you need to specify secondary in what, primary in what. Okay. Then again, move on. Continue for the data collection. This is actually the determining factors for you. I mean, in the process of collecting data, you need to know whether you are going to quantitative types of data or qualitative data. Okay, that's very, very important. Again, very related to your study area and scope of your study. Definitely, when we decided to go for quantitative, we are looking into data that later on will be analyzed using software. SPSS, PLS, SAMOS, and many more. All right. Then qualitative, popular, I'm using as well, and Vivo, but available out there is banyak sangat. HubSpot, MaxCada, Raven Eye, so many. But definitely, in your study, right, you select your study area, you set up your scope, then again, identify your research gaps, and research motivation. Later on, you write your problem statement. Then later on, decided which data to collect, whether quantitative or qualitative. This will determine the overall process of data collection of your study. So with that, thank you very much. So mengalu-alukan soalan yang mampu saya jawab. If I cannot answer your questions now, okay, email me directly. I will answer you later on. Okay, thank you.
Doctor, while waiting, right, there is one of the questions from one of the students,
Yeah.
it's about like what if the suggestions from different people are in conflict. This one is actually referred to the first few slides about the study area.
Okay, all right. Again. Different views, different suggestion.
Yes. What if the suggestions from different people are in conflict? This one is talking about the study area.
Okay, all right. That means you are now in the selection process. Okay, you list down all, then you need to discuss with your supervisor. Yeah, because definitely there is no different ideas, a conflict of ideas, a different opinion, definitely. But one thing is important, you need to verify with your supervisors with the full justification. Yeah, because let's say you interested. For me, I'm giving you example of marketing, right? When I decided to go for brand personality, my supervisor will ask me, "Hey, Sudin, what happened to the other different brand or different loyalty, different equity, different brand, whatever, right?" So you need to have a very good justification. Especially number one, from literature, you must have very clear research gaps and research motivation. These two gaps and motivation are very, very important to justify your areas of study. Yes, definitely, there is no, I mean, jawapan yang paling betul, yes, but we need to discuss and verify with your supervisor with the very specific justification, especially from your research gaps and motivation. That will help you. Yeah. Hope answer your questions. Okay. If not, you can actually email me or discuss later on online. I will give you example because definitely in identifying research area in your first step, definitely you will face difficulties and challenges. Definitely, yes. I do agree with you, but we need to handle it carefully and address it properly with your supervisor. Okay. Saya
Doctor,
menjawab soalan ke? Any other questions?
yes, yes, the already say
Yeah.
thank you. Doctor, I have questions, can I ask also?
Yeah, can, no problem.
Because just now I'm not sure whether if my connection got problem or what. When you touch
Okay.
on the pilot studies and exploratory research, right?
Yeah.
I can't really hear about it. Can you repeat for just a brief one for one more time?
That's why on non-probability sampling, right?
Yes, because I'm
Yeah,
very
yeah.
new to the research area, so I'm not sure what is about the pilot studies and also the exploratory research.
Okay, in pilot study, normally we collect data from pilot study because we need to uh, uh, verify our measurement items, especially in developing questionnaire. All right. In the process of developing questionnaire, by employing questionnaire from the previous studies, sometimes you add on your questions, your own questions, self-constructed, or you actually combine from different source, different article, different journals, right? You combine it together in one study, which is your study. So we need to verify all these questions and measurement items by conducting pilot study. But in pilot study, normally we choose sample within or easily to get. So that's why we need non-probability sampling compared to the probability sampling. So by doing that, we collect, let's say, we collect from students. Normally in PhD or masters, untuk senang dapat data, dia go for students. 30 students or 20 students, right? Collect data and they run SPSS, they run factor analysis, for instance. Then they actually go for Chromba Alpha to identify whether they are reliable, boleh dipercayai atau tidak questionnaire-nya. By looking at the Chromba Alpha 0.7 result, you can actually claim that this questionnaire boleh dipercayai dan dipahami oleh respondents. But when we actually talking about the non-probability sampling, yes, in pilot study, easiest for us to collect is from non-probability sampling compared to you go directly to the systematic or you go directly to the cluster just to make sure your questionnaire reliable or not. In my experience, it's enough to use non-probability sampling for the purpose of collecting data from pilot study to verify your question. It's enough for non-probability sampling. Hope answer your question.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, all right.